Welcome to this tutorial on the advanced features of AgilityTrader3. Just be aware of the pause and rewind buttons. When you're reviewing the video, it will enable you to revisit any statements that I make or any illustrations that appear on the screen. Before we look at the features of the Expert Advisor, just have the companion program running, and I'll just give you a brief overview of that. If you look up the top here, we have two buttons. One is to clear all parameters and one is to reset default parameters. So we'll go ahead and press the clear all parameters button, and you can see that it clears out any values that we have entered into the input screen. And of course, with our summary down the bottom here, we have no parameters at the moment. Now, if we wanted to go back to the default parameters, and they are the same as presented on the Expert Advisor, we just click on the reset default parameters. And you can see here that the input panel mimics the same inputs as the panel on the Expert Advisor. Now, as with the Expert Advisor, we have a line describing the instrument codes. We just have one code at the moment, but if you're going to put in multiple codes, just remember to separate them by a space. We have a line of inputs for trade parameters, and then the 4 lines of inputs for buy entry, sell entry, buy exit, and sell exit. And within each line, we do have some pop-down choices. For instance, if we click on type 1, you can see all your particular strategies that you can call up. So just be aware that any input with the down arrowhead has a list of options. One other thing to be aware of is that you do have plus and minus buttons over here. If you to press a plus and minus, you go up to the next input screen for the next set of conditions. This is condition 1, so if we press a plus, we go to condition 2, but we don't have any condition 2 at this stage. We'll just go back to condition 1, but we do have a second set of conditions for the buy and sell exits. That's condition 2 for the sell exit, which brings in the take profit criteria, and similar to the sell exit, condition 2 is the take profit criteria as well. So each time you press the plus or minus, it will take a view of what is on the screen at the time, and if there is any meaningful input, it will save them automatically. If you don't wish to add extra conditions but just make changes to the existing conditions, you can just use the update buttons over on the right hand side, and that will change the input that you see in the panel at the bottom. There's a button to write and read set files. We'll go through the write set file firstly, and the set file initially will open in the My Documents area. You can navigate to wherever you like to save the set files. So we'll just go ahead and save this, and we'll just call it example, just as a test. We click on save. So that set file is now saved. If we were to clear all the parameters, which I will do by pressing the button up the top, we will read that set file back in. So if I click on read, and we navigate to that particular one that we've saved, which I think was called example, that's it. You can see that it has reread that set file back into the inputs. Once again, we have the second lines there. So that's the companion. We'll now move on to the Expert Advisor itself. Here we have the AgilityTrader3 Expert Advisor already loaded. I haven't pressed any buttons, it's just been loaded, and these are the default values. I wanted to talk about optimization and just draw your attention to some of these letters after some of the inputs. There's an A after the wager increase input, there's a B after the RSI periods, a C after the nominated value for the buy entry, and D for the sell entry, and E's for the stop losses, and F's for the take profits. The ones that have the same alphanumeric character at the end simply mean that they will be optimized in unison as the same value. So that would apply to the RSI periods, the stop losses here, and the take profits here. We'll just go ahead and back test the standard inputs, and you can see that it produces a return of $246. Now that of course depends on whether you're working in your base currency. Mine is AUD, but if you're working in euros, it would be euros. So this is a test on the last 3 months of data. Now, I might emphasize that the last 3 months of data comes from your own server, and it is always 3 months exactly to the hour, minute, or whatever time frame you're using. Our default time frame in this particular one is 60 minutes, so this will be 3 months to the hour previously for data. No point in working with data more or older than that, because market behaviour changes and you don't get meaningful information from a year ago, because there's a completely different set of economic factors in play at the time, so you don't really get much info or much value out of that, and that's why I've deliberately chosen only the last 3 months of data. Now, if we were to go ahead now and optimize this, we've got, I think, 6 values for optimization. I'll go ahead and press the button. You can see the percentage completed is there. A fair bit being optimized here, a little bit of overflow into the equity graph, but that's purely due to keeping the size of the video to a lower size, hence I'm not using all my screen resolution purely for that reason. And that's why I do recommend that you keep your charts maximized when you're running AgilityTrader3. You can see here up to 42% completed. It automatically will place in the top 10 results as it cycles through the optimization. And at this stage, we still have the figures for the standard back test, although when this is completed, it will automatically select the best optimization figures and run a back test on those figures. We'll change these inputs here and of course change the results here. So we're getting fairly close to the finish of that now. When this finishes, you will note that the top one will change colour, it will go to red, and we'll show you this in a moment. So up to 100%. You can see here now that the best result is 1779. It's a big improvement on the $200 odd originally, and of course we have a better curve for the equity. And here are the revised figures based on that best optimization, and you can notice that all the figures up here have been changed to correspond with the figures derived from the optimization. Now you can click on any of these. If we were to click on this one here, if you watch the curve, you will just get a very small change in the curve. So any one that you press on will actually run through a quick back test. And the currently highlighted one, the figures will be transferred up there. So we'll go back to our best one. I'm going to write this set file, so I'll save it for future reference. So if I click on write set file, and we're just going to give this a generic name at the moment. I'll just call it RSI, and click on OK. Now that has written the set file, but the set file has gone to a particular area within the MetaTrader 4 language, and I'll show you how to access that file. What we'll do is we'll right click, go into Expert Advisors, look at Properties, and we can load that particular Expert Advisor. Now when you press the load button firstly, it will default to the presets, just bring that down a bit, to the presets directory. This particular file, because of the design of MetaTrader, will always go in under MQL4 and Files. And the particular one that we just used was this one here. So if I click on that one and then click on OK, we will have those figures that we were talking about before. If I do a back test, we're back to that nice clean equity curve that we had. So that's just a little peculiarity of MetaTrader, and it's called a sandbox effect. And a sandbox effect simply means that it uses its own particular directory for file handling. And it's a very similar type of scenario that you have with your Apple iPad and iPhones. All their files are written to a particular area for each application. So that's enough on the optimizations at this stage. I wanted to now cover some of the advanced features relating to strategies. I did make mention in the last update, which I posted, that I would be talking about HTM and LTM. So we'll go ahead and bring that up, and I'll just bring it up. The format, by the way, for the discussion on all these indicators is that I will discuss it on a chart initially, and then we'll make reference to the inputs on the companion program. And of course, any companion or program which creates a set file, I will include a copy of those as an addendum to the post where I place this video at post 1. So we'll be talking about indicators and set files. All those indicators and set files will be included at the bottom of post 1. So let's go ahead and look at this concept of HTM and LTM. Now, if we go into documentation, probably firstly, we look at HTM and LTM. HTM represents the highest price within a time range, and LTM represents the lowest price within a time range. Now, back to our chart again, and this will all come into place now. I'm talking about a scenario here where we're looking at the open of the Dow with the New York Stock Exchange. Now, the New York Stock Exchange opens at 9:30 in the morning, Monday to Friday, and closes at 4 p.m. So if we go back to our chart, you will need to identify on your MetaTrader platform what MetaTrader time corresponds to that particular time of opening. Now, unfortunately, this is closed at the moment because it closed at 10 o'clock, being a weekend, but that gives you your MetaTrader time there. So basically, you have to correlate that time with the close and, sorry, the open of the New York Stock Exchange. So it's just a matter of doing the maths required to work out what time on your MetaTrader platform represents New York Stock Exchange open. That particular time is quite important with the inputs. Now, in my particular case, it corresponds with, if I can hover over this, at 18:30 MetaTrader time, the New York Stock Exchange opens. Now that will be important in our inputs for the HTM and LTM. I'm only looking at the first 40 minutes as a scenario of the New York Stock Exchange opening and a mad first 40 minutes and then a settling down into a particular direction of trade. So in this particular case, we're referencing the Dow Jones Index. And I'm looking at, on a 5-minute time frame, the first 8 bars or the first 40 minutes. So opening up at 18:30, I'm looking at the end of that period being 19:10. I can just get it, there it is there, 19:10 is the end. So it's the first 40 minutes of, I'm looking at the highest and lowest values within that area, and then I'm looking to open a trade if those boundaries between the highest and the lowest are breached in the next 50 minutes or so. So we go through, say, from 10:10 to 11 o'clock. You can see here at about 19:25, which represents, what's that, about 15 minutes. So it's about 19:25 would be just basically about 55 minutes after Dow opens, we do get a breach of that first 40-minute channel. Now, at this stage, that's given you a little bit of explanation about looking for a highest within a particular time limit and a lowest between a particular time limit and setting up a strategy where we can trade that. So I'm going to go back to the companion program now. I'm going to read in a set file based on what we've just been talking about, and this is called time-based set. Now, the first thing to notice in this particular one is that we're referencing the close price, and we're looking for the close price to cross that boundary. So what we have here is the close price crossing, and type 2 is the highest specified in the time range. And what we're looking at there is a parameter of 2 of 19 and a parameter of 3 of 10, and that represents 19:10 MetaTrader3 time. I'll make reference to this in the documentation, and if we look at highest price within a time range, the hour of the day is parameter 2, and the time, the minute of the hour is parameter 3, and the buffer that we're going to use is the tolerance we have, if any, to a break of the high or low boundary. So if you put in a buffer of 5 for the break out to the top, it would be the price has increased beyond 5 pips of the maximum, and a buffer of -5 the lowest, where the price has gone below the lowest minus another 5 pips. Over here in the look back bars, of course, is the number of bars to look back from the end of the period. So back into our advisor here, we've got 8 look backs. So it's a look back of 8. We put in the end period, not the start period, but the end period. So the end period is 1910. This actually should be on 5-minute chart. I forgot to change that. It should be on a 5-minute chart, and we're looking back 8 periods. So it's 8 periods back, which is 40 minutes from 1910. And that defines the time range. And this is not so many bars back from the last bar. This is so many bars back from a defined time point, a defined point in time. And in our particular case, it's 1910, which is the MetaTrader equivalent of 40 minutes after the Dow open. And you will need to work out these times yourself. You might be working with the FTSE, so it's a completely different time, and you mightn't be GMT +2 for a MetaTrader 4 time, as I am. So there's those values there. So we're saying we want the close to cross above. That's actually AB, the start of AB for above. And you want it to cross the highest price in the time range ending at 1910, going back 8 bars. Now we do have a second requirement here, and the second requirement is that we want our time of trading only to go until 2000. In other words, I'm only really giving myself, by design, 50 minutes for this move to be made. Now, if you don't have a breach within the 50 minutes after the end of that first 40-minute period, my own strategy, and this has been quite a successful strategy for me, is not to trade. So I have a second condition, and you can see the second condition down here with joined by the and. There's the and the time is less than 2000 hours. And so that is the basis of the set file, and I will upload a copy of this set file. I'm just using standard stop losses and take profits. You look, in this situation, I'm only looking for 10 pips, so you could consider maybe just making that 10 rather than 30. So just say hypothetically we would make these changes. So I'll make that 10, make that 10. We've updated this one here. We made that 5 minutes, so I'm going to do an update on that one, update on that one, update on that one. So they are now reflected down here. We've made that stop loss 10. I have noticed that it's still 30 there, so we'll use the plus sign and we'll make that 30. I can drop the alphabetical character at this stage. We're not going to optimize this, but you could optimize it and work out what periods work best for you. Update those two. Just remember, if you make changes, press the update button and then write out the set file, and we'll just rewrite that set file there. So look, that's dealt with HTM and LTM. That's the highest time within a particular time frame and the lowest price within a particular time frame. Let's go on to another feature. See if I can get this right. And this one is based on pivots. So I have a pivot indicator. It will be uploaded as part of the package I said I'd upload. And you need to establish when you're going to calculate pivots, on what basis you're going to calculate them. Now, I would suggest that you calculate pivots on the close of the New York stock market. Look, it's just a standard thing. You can work on end of day, but I find that the most significant price action ends basically at the close of the New York market. So I basically would need to nominate in the expert advisor the time at which I want these calculations made. And there is provision within the inputs for that. I'm just showing you this here. This has been worked on the Thursday activity, and it's the start of the Thursday day is basically at the close of the previous section. It goes through to the close of the Wednesday section. So that's where all your calculations are made on the activity within that 24-hour period. And these are the plots of the, you can see the pivot point, resistance 1, resistance 2, resistance 3, and if we just break that down a bit, support 1, support 2, and support 3. Now these are all defined points that AgilityTrader3 can calculate, and you can make your trading decisions on these. So once again, let's just have a quick look in the manual for the reference to that. And if we were to look at pivots, you can see that in parameter number 1, just going up the top, parameter number 1, we're going to nominate the particular point that we're interested in. And also over in the shift area, that's the shift, that last input. And by the way, this table, I would print it out and have it handy when you're working with AgilityTrader3, because all your inputs are based on what the information in this table is. That is your MT4 time that you're going to use for the end of day basis. Now, in my particular situation, New York Stock Exchange closes at 0100 on my MetaTrader 4 times, so that will be the basis of my inputs. Now back to the companion, and we'll read in the set file for pivots. Look, I'm not going to talk too much from here on because I can see this video getting a little bit too long, but suffice to say that there is a format. The parameter 1, the 6 and the 1 relate to the, for the buy, we're referencing the resistance 3, and for the sell we're referencing support 3. So we're looking for a crossing above, a crossing below. We've got the second item there is the buffer you use, and you want a 5 pip crossing through. So it's a genuine cross through the highest resistance point and a genuine cross through the lowest support point, and that will form the basis for our trading. So I know I'm glossing over these inputs a little bit quickly, but as I said, I will upload the set files, and you can look at the actual settings, and it will all come into line when you also reference the inputs required for pivot points. Let's move on to the next item I wanted to discuss, and we'll see if we can get this right. This one's Fibonacci. Now look, Fibonacci is a little bit subjective because you have to nominate the number of periods that you're going to look back on. I'd suggest about 100 periods is a reasonable amount of, 100 periods ends roughly there. So we're looking at the lowest level and the highest level in that particular period. And don't forget, your Fibonacci tool is this little fella here, that one there. So when you put that on a chart, it will automatically, providing you nominate the high and the low points, it will automatically put those lines on your chart. Excuse me while I just go back to where we were. So all I have here is just the levels plotted on the chart using that pre-supplied icon on the toolbar. Now the way we reference Fibonacci is once again straight to our help file. We have the inputs here, if I can find them. Fibonacci, it's the level value. Now the level value is simply a number. 62 of course corresponds to the 61.8 level, 38 to the 38.2 level, and these are the levels that you can nominate. You can also nominate a buffer in pips for a particular transgression of a level. Let's go back to the chart and let's show you what we're talking about there. So for instance, if I was looking for a buy entry out of this scenario, I'll be looking for the price to retrace back through the 61.8 level and to go 5 pips beyond it, and then I'd enter a buy. So I would know at that stage that the Fibonacci level of 61.8 is not acting as resistance, and that the price is penetrated through that, and the reverse applies for a sell trade. So back to our inputs, I'm going to read in a set file relating to Fibonacci, if I can find it. There we go. And here we have the inputs where we have the close crossing above a Fibonacci level of 62 with a buffer of 5, and similarly for a sell it's crossing below a Fibonacci level of 62 with a buffer of -5. So once again, that will be included in a set file, which I'll upload. Now we're moving on to another feature. This is another feature which I haven't really talked about at any stage in the forum. It's the highest linear price and the lowest linear price. Now, highest linear price, lowest linear prices are simply names for support and resistance, but to keep the uniformity with highest within a time period and lowest within a time period, I'm calling it highest linear price and lowest linear price. Now, I have an indicator here which is plotting support and resistance. And if we go to the indicators inputs, you can see that there is a minimum gap for the highest and lowest points that are being joined up at 15, and we're looking back 100 bars, and I'd suggest they are reasonable figures for it. In fact, in the Expert Advisor, this one is programmed into the Expert Advisor. This one here is still definable, 100 bars. But it is based on this indicator, which we can see on the chart here. So it's basically saying when the close penetrates the support point, resistance point, enter a buy trade, and when the close, and if we move that up a bit, if the close penetrates the support point, enter a sell trade. In the documentation, there's a reference to these as well. Number of look-back bars is specified in the look-back area, and the can't find that again. The buffer is specified in parameter 1. So back to the companion. We'll read that set file in, which is linear, I think it's called. And here we have the inputs. So the highest linear base price, the look back periods is 100. Actually, that parameter 1 there is not required. We can get rid of that. There are no parameters for close price, so I'll just make that 0 there. So what we have is the close price crossing the highest linear base price by 5 pips, or for the sell situation, the close price crossing below the lowest linear price base by 5 pips. I'll just go ahead and rewrite that set file, because by the way, before I do that, we should do this update, because we changed those parameters there. So press update there, and it will now be reflected in the input panel. Go ahead and resave that one, because I made changes. I didn't do that purposely, believe it or not, so I'll rewrite that. But it gives you an idea of how to make changes and write the set files. So that's the highest and lowest linear price. Let me just go back and see what else I've got there. Yes, the final one I wanted to talk about was divergence. Now, divergence, and I have plotted this divergence on a chart for you to see what we're talking about. Divergence simply means where there's a disparity between the trend in the price movement and the trend in the RSI, or that could be MACD. So I've got an RSI here as an example. So you can see over this range here, we've joined the lowest points, which shows you the trend in the price movement, and we've joined the similar points here, which are the highest points, with the RSI moving down. So we have divergence here. We've got increasing price, decreasing RSI, and what we're looking for is, once that divergence becomes apparent, we have what's happened here. And this is, even though the price had appeared to be increasing at that point, because of this divergence, the price starts to drop. And we're looking for trading opportunities like that. So we have the reference to that in the manual. And if we look in the manual for divergence, we're looking to specify the RSI periods in parameters 1. In the case of MACD, it's the RSI, MACD, it's the fast period, the slow period, and the smoothing period. So that's parameters 1, 2, and 3. And also the number of look-back bars we need to look back for that divergence. I would suggest 100 bars, same as with some of the other parameters, some of the other strategies. So to bring this into the companion, if I was to read in the divergence RSI set, we're nominating the RSI of 14 periods, and we're saying that now this is the tricky bit for divergence. We don't actually have a value of divergence itself. What it does is it recognizes by looking at these things programmatically that if there is divergence, it gives you a value of 1. Now it's the same value for sell, because it recognizes whether you're looking for a sell entry or a buy entry. And if you say that it's equal to 1, you are saying that the divergence is actually in existence. So if there's no divergence, that will plot as a 0. But the minute it becomes a 1, divergence is recognized and a trade will open. So it's, when you're talking about divergence, you're talking about being equal to a nominated value of 1. For both the buy and sell, it differentiates between buy entry and sell entry, and looks for obviously negative divergence for the sell and positive divergence for the buy. So that's divergence, set file to be uploaded. Look, the video's probably gone on for a fair while. It's over 30 minutes at this stage. I think that's enough for this particular video. Naturally, you may have some questions, so please post them on the forum. Look, thank you for your participation, and no doubt you'll have a bit of fun discovering the set files that I upload.